Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Dyslexia in the Elementary Years. I'm Amy Roberts, and I will be guiding you through today's lesson. So, this whole video is focused on characteristics of dyslexia. So, the goal before you finish today's lesson is that you will be able to recognize the characteristics of dyslexia. So, before we begin, I want you to stop and think to yourself, what do you think dyslexia is? And if you're using this program as part of a professional development session, this might be a great time for a think, pair, share. So just take a moment and think, what do you think dyslexia is? When everyone's finished, you can go ahead and move on. So, to define dyslexia, it is really a phonological disability. That means a disability in processing sounds. This is far different than what people usually assume about dyslexia, that it's a visual disability where students maybe see letters backwards or reversed, things like that. That is actually not dyslexia. Dyslexia is rooted in a disability with sounds. Because of this disability with sound, students really struggle with reading and also oftentimes with spelling, which we will describe these things in more detail in just a moment. So, when you're thinking about literacy, there are three domains to literacy. The first is oral language, then reading, then writing, and they all sort of fit together to combine to be what we come to think of as dyslexia. So, first, I want to talk about oral language. A student with dyslexia may show signs of struggles in oral language, and these can be an initial signal that there is a problem. So, because oral language lays the foundation for literacy, it's really important that oral language is supported and developed, especially as students are very young. So, some things you might notice with your child or with a student that might clue you in a little bit that there could be a phonological disability such as dyslexia. So, if the student is late to talk or has difficulty pronouncing words, maybe they fumble over some sounds, they might really struggle with word retrieval, things like that. Now, it's important to note that someone with dyslexia would, if a person has dyslexia and there is a language component for that particular individual, it would likely be several of these challenges and they would persist over time. So, if you have a young child, for example, a 3 or 4 year old that often confuses left or right or front and back, things like that, it's likely not cause for major concern. It's if you see several of these symptoms and they are very persistent over time. This is really just to signal to everyone that dyslexia is rooted in sounds, and sounds are a large part of language. So, next is reading skills, and that's really going to be the meat of this presentation because reading is where dyslexic students really demonstrate quite a bit of challenge. So let's dive in to reading skills. So we are going to look at some specific components of reading skills. There are other components as well, such as vocabulary and comprehension, but for the sake of this presentation, we are really focusing on those essential building blocks to literacy or to reading. In particular, word recognition is where so many dyslexic students will start to show a challenge. But the challenge actually begins far before the word recognition stage. So let's begin with phonology. I've used that word a few times already, so let's go ahead and define it. It is the study of speech sounds. So, as I mentioned before, many people are under a false assumption that dyslexia is a visual disability that makes things appear backwards or in the wrong order, things like that. But in fact, dyslexia is a disability that is rooted in sounds, which is an area known as phonology. So, first, let's look at brain structure and how that plays into phonology. So, as you can see in this image, there is a non impaired brain or a typical brain, and then there is a dyslexic brain. So, what you can see in this image is that there's a lack of activation in key areas for individuals with dyslexia. And what happens is students who have dyslexia, they are really only activating that one area that you see in the image there. And therefore, they recruit other parts of the brain, such as the right hemisphere and also the frontal lobes, as they're trying to learn how to read or how to manipulate sounds. Any of these steps are involved, any of these literacy steps that we'll be talking about. So when those key areas are not activating, it makes a pathway that is far less efficient, meaning that students are much clunkier, slower, more labored as they're trying to do some of the skills that I'm about to show you. Um, okay, so part of phonology, if you're a teacher, you probably already know quite a bit about this, but as a parent, you probably don't know much about this. Phonological awareness is a component to reading that is really very important. It's a critical building block to being able to decode or sound out words. So, some skills that your teacher, your child's teacher, or if you're a teacher, might be practicing with students. They might be rhyming, blending, segmenting, deleting, adding. Those are all just different activities of manipulating sounds in words. And these skills are very crucial because when a child can manipulate sounds and they can hear those sounds, then they will be more ready for the following steps of literacy, which I'll describe in a moment. So, to really illustrate this, I would like for you to watch a video of a teacher doing a segmenting and deleting lesson. So, this is a really great example of what phonology looks like in action. As you're watching the video, please keep in mind somebody in your life who might be really good at doing something like this, or in particular, a student or your child, if they would really struggle with this type of skill, because that would absolutely clue you in to that, okay, there's a challenge here with their phonological skills, and that could really have some negative impacts down the line. Unfortunately, I'm not able to embed videos within my presentation. So if you look in my description of this YouTube video, there will be a few different links to videos that show great examples of what I'm talking about. So for this segmenting and deleting section, I would like for you to pause this video, and then you can look in my description and click on the link that's next to video 1. After you have watched that, please come back to this point in the presentation. It looks like I'm at about 7 minutes. All right, so if you've watched that video, we are going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So after phonology, where students are really good at manipulating their sounds, then we attach those sounds to written print. So this is the study of phonics. And phonics are really the bridge between phonology and smoother word recognition, where a child might see the word cat and immediately they can recognize and they know that that word says cat. So again, here's another video to describe what I'm talking about. And in this video, this teacher is really demonstrating for her students the letter X and the sound they should make when they see the letter X. That is phonics, is connecting the sounds and the written print. This teacher is even starting to move into the word recognition portion of reading, where she is having students sound out the words and then start to blend them together. So you'll see that this is a phonics lesson, but it is starting to kind of inch towards the word recognition. So again, please click the link. It says video 2. When you're finished, you'll come back to this point in the presentation. We are right now at about minute 8 minutes, 40 seconds. All right, now that you've seen a phonics video, we're going to move on to word recognition. So this is when students apply their knowledge of phonology, or the sounds, and then how those connect to letters, so phonics. They're connecting those two skills to be able to decode or sound out words. So phonology plus phonics is really where we get into the word reading. And this process gets more and more automatic over time. This is oftentimes where dyslexic students start to really bump up against the disability, and teachers or parents might become more and more aware that there's really a challenge here. So in this video, you are going to see, it's more of a presentation. just about first graders and how they are reading, and they might come to a word they're unsure of, and then they'll have different strategies to try to sound out that word. I do want to note in this video, they talk about a child using context, which is actually not the best strategy. What the science is telling us is that the best strategy students can use are their knowledge of phonics. So they really should be sounding out words. So go ahead and watch as these children are working on their word recognition. They've gotten a little bit better at recognizing words, and they are sounding out a few words here and there as they read. When you're finished watching that, we are now at moment 10 minutes and 15 seconds. So after you watch video 3, come right back here. All right, so after word recognition is fluency. So when you're a person that's dyslexic, if you're struggling with phonology, you have a hard time with the sounds, and then that makes it hard to connect sounds and letters, which then makes it really hard to know words just automatically. That ultimately can really affect your fluency. So your ability to read things very smoothly. Fluency is broken into rate, accuracy, and prosody. And when a child has really excellent fluency, their reading sounds just as if they're talking. It's not too fast or too slow. They use great expression, and it's also highly accurate. So here I've listed 2 different videos for you to watch. The first one is a typically developing student who does not have dyslexia, and you will notice that she is able to add expression to her work. She's also it's very fluent. It sounds just like a person who might be talking. Then the fluency video of a student who does have dyslexia. You will notice that this one is a lot clunkier. It's a bit slower. And also because of her struggles with word recognition, she is less able to add some of that expression into her work because so much of her working memory is really focusing on decoding those words. All right, so first, this is the fluency video for a typically developing student without dyslexia. It will be video 4. After you watch it, come on back here. This is now minute 12. All right, so next you will get to watch the dyslexia video. Again, this student will be quite a bit choppier, and I just want you to pay attention to how this student reads as they go along. This is moment 12 minutes and 20 seconds. And again, that will be video 5. All right, so as we discussed, dyslexia is a phonological disability. So that disability really can come out when students are trying to write. So if you are not able to accurately connect sounds with letters, then it not only affects your reading, it also will affect your spelling. So students with dyslexia might have many spelling mistakes, or they might struggle to put words onto paper. Proofreading is another challenge. So right here, I've shown 2 examples. These are first grade students. The first one is non-dyslexic, and the second one is dyslexic. As you can see, it's just much harder for students with dyslexia to make all of those connections. As I mentioned, they have less efficient pathways in their brain. So when they are trying to get sounds onto paper in the form of words, it is much harder to do so. And finally, there are some other characteristics of having dyslexia. There are actually some great strengths of having dyslexia. Because those students are recruiting their right hemisphere and also their frontal lobes, oftentimes these individuals are great problem solvers. They also tend to be very creative or think outside the box. They can see the big picture. And oftentimes these people, because of their disability, they end up having incredible work ethic and grit. So that is all for this edition of Dyslexia in the Elementary Years. I hope to see you back for video 3, where we will talk more about the science behind dyslexia. Thank you.